Welcome to the Revolution of Man podcast. I'm your host, Lance Cashion. This is episode 34, recorded live at Texas Christian University. Our topic tonight is how the church can end human trafficking. And I'm with my friend and fellow pastor, Tyler Durham. The Revolution of Man podcast is an extension of my blog at Substack. So go there, you can check it out, read some things I've written, and watch some of the videos and listen to the podcast there as well. So don't forget to like, share, and comment on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, I'm the CEO and founder of the Forge Room Foundation. We are forging Christians who think biblically, live boldly, and shape culture in our city. And a generous family has put up a $35,000 challenge grant. So you can go to forgeroom.org and learn more, and please consider a gift to the Forge Room. That being said, enjoy episode 34 of the Revolution of Man podcast, recorded live at TCU at the Christian Academic Series. See ya.
Yeah, so we talked earlier this week, and I was like, for this conversation is going to be more of a Q&A just because of your experience in the anti-trafficking work in Fort Worth. And so how did a small business owner get so involved in the anti-trafficking work in Fort Worth? And how long have you been involved too?
About 9 years. I can give you the exact date. I was on staff at Christ Chapel as a local outreach pastor. It was May 6th of 2016. Two women who were in the room came and set a meeting with me and basically opened up the books on the sex trafficking, particularly happening with children in my community. And as a local outreach pastor, I knew there's prostitution, there's organized crime, there's things like that going on in our community. I always thought that the child sex trafficking stuff was happening somewhere overseas. You hear about this, you've seen movies like Sound of Freedom, you think it's happening over there. Well, these two women brought the receipts and said, we've got a problem right here in our neighborhoods, and it's not just what you typically think as more poorer areas of the city. It's happening everywhere. And from there, I joined the Five Stones Task Force, which is Tarrant County Five Stones. It's under the Fort Worth Police Department, and it's a collaborative effort of agencies. So you have Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, HSI, Fort Worth PD, some other PDs from around the area. And then you have a collaborative effort with several nonprofits, probably 40 or 45 nonprofits that come to these monthly meetings. And I'll have the information a little later. I can share a slide if you'd like to come to a monthly meeting. We'd love to have you. And then there's concerned citizens, people that are teachers, retired, just involved in the city that show up to these meetings. And we grew from probably 10 or 12 people to now there's 80 something, sometimes 100 people showing up to these meetings. And then we stream them online as well. And we have experts come in and talk about a topic in human trafficking. And then we get law enforcement updates on what's going on with cases in Tarrant County. And some of them have been very large national cases. And we get to network with one another, and it's truly a collaborative effort. Everybody pitches in, everybody has a lane, and share resources and connections in order to fight this in Tarrant County, because Tarrant County is actually one of the worst areas for human trafficking in the country. And
so I've heard you say that before, and it's hard to believe.
it is.
Why is Tarrant County? I mean, first of all, what are some of the top places in the country, and why is Tarrant County, of all places, one of the top places for human trafficking, sex trafficking?
There's several areas in the country. So you have, the West Coast, LA, and places like that. You have Houston, which is usually number one or number two in the country.
New York, I would guess, the big cities.
The big cities. And then you have Tarrant County, in Dallas, you have the DFW area, and one of the reasons why it's such an epicenter of human trafficking is because you have all these major, first of all, the big cities. You have all these major highways, trains, buses,
International airport.
It's a big hub. Plus, you have sports teams you have major sports teams, and that draws a lot of human trafficking. And in June, the World Cup's coming. You have men with disposable income, and every trafficker on the planet is wanting to do business in our backyard. And so that's just one piece, but there's a lot of different
One of the
factors.
reasons why, yeah.
But those are the main thing, because it's a hub, but there's organized crime. There's multiple gangs that are active, both local gangs, international crime syndicates. And then you also have familial trafficking and trafficking out of the foster care system.
So let's talk about, let's define some of these terms, because we throw these around a lot, but it can get confusing. Like, what is sex trafficking, human trafficking, and is that different than, prostitution or legalized prostitution? How do you categorize all of these different areas?
So defining terms is important. So what I want to do is just to read the definition of trafficking. You have really two main definitions of human trafficking. They're broken into labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And then from there, they move into some other areas. So sex trafficking is in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained the age of 18. Labor trafficking, a little bit different, which is recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjugation to involuntary servitude and debt bondage or slavery. So then labor trafficking and sex trafficking go hand in hand, because oftentimes if a young woman is being trafficked, labor trafficked, she will also be sex trafficked. So they're not just delineated, they're either doing one or the other. Mm-hmm. And then you get into prostitution, there's a paradigm shift that's happening nationally around prostitution, where for years, decades, law enforcement would arrest a young woman, let's say, and charge her with prostitution, and that would be the crime. Treat her as a criminal, rather than finding out if someone is using force, fraud, or coercion against her, taking her money, forcing her to have sex, mm-hmm. and then trafficking her. So now there's been a paradigm shift where in a lot of cities, and this needs to continue, where law enforcement is being trained in order to first approach what you call prostitute, the victim, as a victim, and treat them as a victim, and then look for the criminal hand behind them, the buyer and the trafficker. So that way, that opens up cases. That way, you're not arresting victims who are being victimized, and then you put them in the system, and then the trafficker and the buyers get off scot-free. Mm-hmm. So there is a paradigm shift, and it needs to continue. And then with sex trafficking, it breaks out down to child sex trafficking, and then you have adult, and you have children, both men and women. A lot of times people will talk about the men and boys that are being trafficked, but the numbers continue to rise because young men and boys are vulnerable, mm-hmm. and there is a demand for that. And so that's kind of a big picture.
So, yeah. So just to clarify, and just to kind of be a contrarian for a minute to get some clarity on it. So even in a place like Las Vegas, where prostitution is legalized, and there are many women who would say, I'm doing this not by coercion, but as a form of making money, and there's still trafficking going on.
Yes. So if from my perspective, I'm not real educated on how everything works in Las Vegas, but prostitution is legal in some areas of Las Vegas, and they have brothels where women work. They're still selling themselves and giving a portion of their income to whoever is in charge of the brothel. Very few women, and like I said, there's some experts in the room that could tell you, choose to prostitute themselves.
Yeah.
Some of the youth and some women, that we've seen, particularly in Tarrant County, that will have what they call survival sex, meaning they live on the street, they can't support themselves, so the only alternative for them they see is to sell themselves, but the numbers are very low of the overall trafficking piece of women that choose to sell themselves. There's a need, or no little girl wakes up in the morning and say, I want to sell myself.
Sure.
How for sex. So that's kind of how it works out from my limited perspective. And again, I don't have a lot of knowledge about how Las Vegas works, the intricacies, but in Fort Worth, most of these, I'd say the majority, I don't know what the percentage is because it's a crime. It's under the radar.
But in Fort Worth, there's brothels, there's child trafficking, there's all the above.
All the above. Illegal massage businesses oftentimes they're fronts for trafficking, selling women.
One of the things I asked you the other day as we were prepping for this is, what's the profile? Is there a particular type of person that fits a profile, or is it all over the board?
You mean for a buyer?
For a buyer.
It's all over the board. Pastors, titans of industry, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah. Celebrities, entertainment.
It's all over the place. So, and you see it, come out in the media. Sometimes you're like, this guy bought a child or and you would think, oh, he was a stand-up citizen in the community. That would never happen. It's like cancer. It could strike anyone.
Yeah.
And so profiling a buyer is hard to do because they come from all demographics, all different backgrounds, all different socioeconomic levels.
I had years ago at a different church in a different context, I had a guy who was in my ministry call me and say, hey, I want to get together and I've got some things to share with you. And he was pretty involved in the ministry. I knew him relatively well, but a very shy kid. And he wasn't a kid, he was a young adult, but he was shy. He was very polite. And we got together and he confessed that he and his newlywed, they had just gotten married probably a year before,
right,
had gotten a divorce. She left him because he had an addiction to prostitution. He would go to the seedy part of that city that I was in, and he had a normal job. He had a wife. He was involved in the ministry, and he would sneak out in the dead of night and go to the other side of town and hook up with a prostitute. Right. And he was doing it for years. And he dropped a few other bombshells that just I couldn't believe it. And one of them was that he contracted AIDS and he had to tell his wife, and that led to their separation and then divorce. But I mean, that was one of the few times where I was shocked. I've seen a lot growing up in the baseball world, in the locker room, playing
right,
college and minor league baseball. There's very few things a young adult guy could tell me that I haven't seen or experienced myself. But that one kind of dumbfounded me. How does a guy like that end up at 2 a.m. sneaking over to the seedy side of town, getting out of his car, going into a place and buying a prostitute? How does that happen?
Sin.
Elaborate on that.
And a young man doesn't wake up one morning, the 8-year-old boy doesn't wake up one morning and say, I want to buy a girl for sex. It's small decisions that happen over multiple years. And the interesting thing about sexual sin is that it's so devious and deviant that it goes from maybe seeing a pornographic picture or listening to a friend, talk about girls in a certain way, right? And then he starts to believe these things, and it's just a picture, and then the picture doesn't excite him as much. And it's like, well, I'll watch a video, and then you kind of escalate to this other level.
So you're telling me that those men who are buyers in this world, it started with they're just like everybody else. They're not like a separate. Because we talk about a lot of these people with the Epstein, files coming out and P. Diddy, and we almost treat these people like they're demons. They're separate. They're a different category of human. But you're telling me that it all started in the same way.
They're just like us. We all start. We're all sinners. But the issue is that as this escalates, the excitement level from what they're seeing, what they're absorbing, gets to the point where the videos just don't do it anymore. And this isn't every man. I mean, I've struggled with pornography and things like that, but the excitement doesn't do it for them anymore. And so there's a step that is taken. Well, maybe I'll go to the strip club. You go to the strip club, and then it becomes physical, and then that doesn't really do it. And then before you know it, you're purchasing another human being.
Which, to your point,
and then that then goes down a dark place, because then certain things aren't as exciting anymore, and some men will go all the way to purchasing a child and just keep on going down this deviant, sinful, dark path. It's not every guy.
We've all experienced the dissatisfaction of sin, that the thing that was giving me pleasure and satisfaction all of a sudden is not doing that. It's boring, it's predictable. I need to find something that increases the adrenaline or satisfies that pleasure. And so some guys, they just keep going down the rabbit hole until they find themselves
like your friend with AIDS.
How did I get there?
Marriage, how to get, you didn't wake up one day and decide to do that. It happened gradually over years, making these small decisions to go down this path. And it's almost like, I struggle with drugs. Well, that started with having a beer.
Yeah.
Right? And so had a beer, and then graduated to like vodka. And then somebody offered me pot. And then I didn't really like pot, so I was like, well, I'll try psychedelics. And psychedelics turned into MDMA. And then before you know it, I'm, doing coke.
Yeah.
And I didn't just wake up, that day I had that beer and say, I'm gonna have this beer, I'm gonna go do some cocaine. That doesn't happen that way. It was a matter of years of this sin manifesting, and it just that's where the excitement,
the pursuit of pleasure, and
you're filling women as well with that sexual. You have to fill that void. You're trying to fill the void. You're chasing the pleasure. You think it's going to bring you fulfillment or whatever, but the void just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like a black hole. It just sucks everything in, and if it's not stopped, then it'll just basically destroy you.
And sexual perversion, I mean, you look back through the history of civilization, it's always manifested. This type of behavior has always manifested itself. But there are moments in time where I feel like there's more restraint, that there's a taboo associated with it. And I think we're living in a time in our culture where, when you remove God and you remove objective truth, like that, hey, there's this objective truth that we all submit to,
right,
whether you like it or not. When you remove those two things, and now truth is relative, what's true for you might not be true for me, and hey, we're all just trying to express our individuality, and the truly authentic person is it's going to just express whatever they feel. In that context, why is pursuing a prostitute bad? Where's the moral outrage? How is that a transgression? Right. When our society has removed transgressions? There is no transgression.
Well, there's the transgressions, and Carl Trueman talks about this in his book Crisis of Confidence, that the transgression is there to be transgressed. So the idea when truth is relative and morality is relative, then the transgression, rather than being a guardrail, it's something to break through. That
Yeah.
becomes a part of your life of pursuing your authentic self. Is like, well, I've got to break through this. Well, when you believe that truth is subjective and it's all up to me, then you will believe a lie eventually. If you're not allowing the objective truth to form and shape the way that you think, live.
And then you add to that not only is truth subjective and, there is no ethic that we all have to submit to, but also, the key to happiness in life is self-fulfillment and avoiding suffering, pursuing pleasure. That's a terrible combination when it comes to the protection of the weaker in society, the protection of young children. They become objects that can really be abused and manipulated.
Yeah, and that's where you get in the current situation where people will just believe a lie and they'll pursue the pleasure, but then because the Christian foundations of our civilization, our nation, have been uprooted and replaced by secularism, then you'll fall back to a former philosophy, which is more of a Roman philosophy, which is power. Mm-hmm. Men have all the power. Men can do whatever they want. If you're a man in Rome, if it was your wife, your daughter, your slave, boy, girl, whatever, you dominated them physically and sexually. And that's how that you expressed your authority and power.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where we fall into.
That's where we're at.
We're not progressing towards a new enlightened era of self-fulfillment, and no, we're actually falling back to
it's that neo-paganism that
paganism.
And you look at the elite class, the institutional leaders. When you look at some of the Epstein files, it's like our elite scientists and academic professors and politicians and philosophers and
Right.
and entertainers and artists. They live in this elite realm. And there's a book I read a few years ago, and I pulled it out in preparation for this. The guy's name's Philip Reif.
Right.
He was a sociologist in the late 20th century, and it's called Charisma. And it's not what you would think it would be about. It's one of those books that you get into and you're like, this is fascinating. But he makes the argument that, we were talking about the kid. I was talking about the young adult who came to me and he was brokenhearted and full of guilt and shame. Reif makes the argument that one of the status symbols of being an elite is transgressing the taboos in society. It's exerting your power, that these things
don't apply to
you.
The law doesn't apply.
And it's like you're in the club, and I used to, when I say used to, a couple weeks ago, I was thinking it's all about blackmail. P. Diddy and Epstein, it's all about blackmailing these powerful elites. But as I've been reading some of these emails between Epstein and whoever the redacted person is,
Yeah.
it's like,
I need those names, by the way.
yeah, it's yes, there's probably blackmail happening, but they're not hiding it. They're like on their Gmail account,
They're proud of it.
just talking about what type of 10-year-old they want, and talking about how great the weekend was doing fill in the blank. They're almost bragging about it. And that's where Reif's book really helped me make sense, is that's charisma, which is another word for grace. That's charisma without God. That's exerting your power, leadership, your magnetism by using whatever you want to use, doing whatever you want to do. And if you also do that, then you're in that club.
Right. And you look at all those names and everything, they come from all different kinds of backgrounds. Like, even they're more elite, but it reminded me when all the Epstein stuff come out, or kind of reminded me of the Sound of Freedom movie. Like, it raised awareness, and that's great. And the Epstein stuff is just despicable, but oftentimes we think it's someone else. It's like, oh, it's those people over there. It couldn't be in my home, a neighbor or someone in my church. Like it's everywhere. So we have to be, as Christians, have discernment and wisdom and a heart for people to understand that this stuff, it's like we talked the other day, like you and I, we are a click away from destroying our ministries, our lives, and our families. One click. That's all it takes, and it's over. And we've seen pastors across the board fall because of the sexual sin. And then when children are involved, and you say, well, why is it kids? It goes back to the adult stuff just doesn't do it for them anymore. And they don't have, it's all situational ethics. It's like, well, and you go into that dark place, and it goes back to Romans 1 where God just gives you over to debased mind and futile thinking and a dark heart where it's normal and it's okay and you can justify it. Like, how do you justify that? We would sit there, how do you justify that? Well, ask them, how did you justify this? And but back to this, situation in our current context in the city is it's happening. Now we wouldn't run around and say that there's a trafficker around every corner and look at all the creepy, white vans around and say, oh, they're kidnapping girls in Walmart. And that's very rare. What's happening is it's happening in the family. There's abuse happening. There's grooming happening with the sexting and sextortion happening in high schools. There's a high school locally where young man was kicked out because he had broken up with his girlfriend. He had pictures of her nude and was sending it to his friends. You can't take that back. And this was apparently a Christian guy. And he got what he deserved, but he's destroyed that young lady's
before we
life.
Before we get into the details, and we joke about this, that I'm always at the 30,000 foot level, and and you like to get into the details. I do want to make one more point on the cultural situation, and that's one of the things we do with this TCU academic series is weave together the philosophy and the theology. But this kind of stuff has been happening throughout the history of mankind. But the Christian ethic made these things taboo, that if you were going to pursue this type of behavior, it had to be in the dead of night behind the scenes. It could really affect your reputation.
There was a
social cost. And today it's almost like there was an associate of who was the Lord Mendelsohn or whatever from England who got in trouble with the Epstein stuff. His former personal assistant or girlfriend or somebody was saying that if you weren't on Epstein's list or in his files, you felt like you were not in the club.
Yeah, you were a loser.
You were a loser. You're not at that level. And I want to read this quote from the Reef book. And actually, I kind of paraphrased it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. But he says, Western culture has turned the idea of taboo upside down. Among the educated class of the 19th and 20th centuries, taboo became a pejorative term. Consequently, any religion or moral system that declared certain behaviors taboo was attacked and ridiculed as primitive and unsophisticated. And here's the observation I made with that. The sophisticated elite today that are seeking to break free from the pre-modern, primitive Christian, ethics have succumbed to irrationality. They're the most irrational people. Right. You look at their behavior, you look at what they're devoting their time and energy to. It's like they're living in a make-believe world. We can defeat death. We can invent.
They can redefine reality.
Redefine reality. It's a fictional world, but taboo, like you shouldn't do this, has become a pejorative in our culture. Now, how does that affect the TCU college student? Because it starts in education, and what Reef says is that the last barrier to this infiltrating the whole culture, this mindset of transgressing the Christian ethics, is the academic world, the academy. That's the last gate to keep out this stuff that was in the past relegated, like you were talking about the Roman Empire.
Right.
Well, this is what the elites do, but the common man lives according to a different ethic. Well, through the educational system, what the elites believe and do starts to seep into
pushed
every
down to the
aspect of
culture.
society.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's why the academy, higher education, universities are at the top of culture. That's where the ideas, the theories get created,
Get normalized.
and they get normalized within the academy, and they start talking about them. It starts to get popular within the academy, and then it gets pushed down to, like arts and music and things like that. Then you start having a perfect idea is Marxism, utopianism. And we're like, well, how did that get pushed down into arts and music? John Lennon's Imagine. Listen to the words.
Yeah.
It's a Marxist theme song, and it shaped a generation. And if there's somebody, I forget who had said that if you let me write the songs of a generation, I care not who writes its laws. So you have the academy, then you have arts and music, then you have the elite circles and influential circles, and that'd be your business leaders, cultural leaders, and then you have politics, and then you have everybody else. And then that's where politicians is pure power, and that's where this is what the culture wants. It becomes law. So that's where you get things like no-fault divorce, abortion on demand,
Birth control.
same-sex marriage, birth control. So once it becomes legal, then it gets pushed down on everybody else, because then it's the law.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you agree with it or not, then you're still, it's law.
And as a Christian,
then in order to be able to reverse those things, it takes 50 years. Roe v. Wade, or slavery in England. It took 35, 40 years for Wilberforce and the Clapham sect to be able to outlaw slavery in England, and that spread over to the United States, who fought a war over it. So to remove, once it comes down into legal, from the academy all the way through the culture down to politics, and it becomes law, it takes
really hard to
a great
reverse.
deal of effort to reverse it and overturn it.
And back to the college student, the 19-year-old, first time away from home, there's this unbelievable freedom that you've never experienced oftentimes. And you have the sinful nature, and then you have in your philosophy class or in your psychology class
Or your English class.
or your English literature class, these ideas about sexuality and about the pursuit of pleasure and where to find happiness and what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And it's like a playground to try to live those ideas out, or even experiment with those ideas.
And that happened to me in colleges. In the sociology department, took sexuality and gender class.
I bet that was a doozy.
Yeah, but it was that type of thinking. It was basically, we did studies on deviant behavior, what makes it deviant.
Really?
And why is it deviant? Well, why should it be deviant? Who says it's deviant? Oh, the culture says it's deviant. Well, they were teaching cultural relativism. So
They were trying to disarm you. They were
Yes.
disarming your
I can't
conscience and
blame
your
them for my behavior in college. I was an idiot.
right.
But I still remember being taught those things. And when you hear it from a professor or someone that's in authority or very influential within the department, you're like, well, it's like hearing it from your pastor.
Yeah, they're an
You're-
authority
you're an
figure.
authority. You're like, well,
They're an
they know what they're
expert.
talking about.
Yeah.
So this seems okay. Then I'm going to go try these. I'm going to live my best life now. I'm going to, live according to these philosophies. But you're not. Most students, at least me, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to go. It was just kind of started
Subconsciously.
form and shape my thinking, which then form and shape my actions. I eventually acted on things that I was learning. But actually, I was going to probably do those things anyway, but it gave me
The freedom, the permission.
Permission.
And that's what permission is, the big word, is that we're living in a permissive society that that as Christians, and we'll sum it up here in a second to leave some time for Q&A. As a Christian, and especially as a Christian college student, you just have to embrace the fact that you're going to live like an outsider in terms of your ethics and your morality, and that's the way. We were talking at the very beginning of it all starts with these small decisions, and it weakens your conscience over time, and you begin to go deeper down the rabbit hole. And as Christians in a Christian community, we're trying to put up the gates.
Right.
We're trying to prevent our brothers and sisters in Christ from escalating.
Yeah. And what as you get older and deal with all the sin in your own life, is that you start to see it out in the culture, and you not only want to protect yourself, your family, and your Christian community, but then when even non-Christians, when children are trafficked, you have a heart to do something. And that's what goes back to, men in the church, is that we need to get our own house in order. There's pornography problems in the church. I think it's close to 67% of men or pastors have dealt with, struggle with pornography. And then there's all kinds of statistics out there.
And you look at the amount of prominent celebrity pastors that have fallen because of sexual sin specifically.
Sexual sin,
it's terrifying.
But then, in order for the church to stand and be able to look at the culture and reestablish the taboos and a Christian social order, Christian moral social order, we have to fix the inside first. Repent, believe the gospel, get help. That's why it's always with men that I talk to, like, don't think you're in the dark by yourself in the room. That you need a brother, sister in Christ, a brother in Christ, really, guys. Flip on the light, realize there's others there struggling and that have been there and gotten out, but you're not alone. That deals with a lot of the shame. Okay, I'm not alone. And then you need someone to come alongside and lead you onto the path of light. Get restored with Christ, repent, and then get the help you need to break free. And then on the other side, women need men and their girlfriends to help protect them, because it's all coming out. The sexualization is everywhere. And all it takes, again, one text, one image, one bad decision when you're having too many drinks or whatever, and then your life is now online. The most intimate, embarrassing thing is out there for the world to see, and now you've got to live with that. Men typically get a pass. Typically, like the Epstein stuff, I'm waiting for indictments. I want investigations, indictments. I want people to go to jail. Until that happens, there is no justice. Women, no, once they're out there, it ends up shaping what the world thinks about. And so it's up to us as men in the church, as pastors, Christian men who fought some of these battles, to go to war for the other men in our church. Not in a way of shame, like, hey, I'm a sinner. But I've been down some of these roads. I know the way out. Let's get you some help, and then get you healed, and then get you out on the battlefield, because here comes another guy that needs help, and you may be the dude that helps him. And I think that's what the church ought to be doing. And as we do those things, we form and shape Christian culture, good culture, and slowly over the years, just like Wilberforce and others, it starts to form and shape a Christian social order where the taboos are now there, the guardrails are now there. Doesn't mean you're going to end human trafficking totally, but it will become unavailable and unthinkable. Like, if you're going to go down that road, you've got to do a lot of work to get there, because it's not socially acceptable.
So we pick these massive topics that 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Yeah.
45 minutes doesn't even scratch the surface, and so I want to close our time before we open up Q&A. So just a quick summary of bullet points of kind of what you just said, because the title of it is How the Church Can End Human Trafficking.
Right.
In reality, until Jesus returns, there's not going to be an end to the objectification of women and children and trafficking. So it's an ideal that we pursue, but we do it understanding that we live in a fallen world. But what can we do as local churches to just kind of summarize that for us?
A lot of times churches will, you'll say, hey, do you want to help in the fight of human trafficking? And they'll say yes and amen. Well, you'll discover that when you talk to the pastors, okay, what are you going to do about the pornography problem in your church, the hearts of men? How are you going to rescue these men from bondage?
So are you saying that before you get into getting involved with human trafficking initiatives, you need to?
Well, you're doing two things at once, because you can be speaking to the churches, your own church, start your own church, your own family, your own church, and then at the same time explore opportunities. Well, okay, who's fighting trafficking in your city? When you have children, particularly young girls, young boys, it's not hard to have the motivation to say, I don't want my kids to grow up in this kind of city. I don't want them to grow up in this kind of world. So then when you wake up in the morning, you're tired of dealing with the darkness and all that, you're like, wait a second, I'm fighting for something. I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for them. And I want them to grow up in a world, that this thing is being pushed back, and that they see that their father has done whatever, God has placed in this specific area. But there's areas where we can get into details, and Fort Worth, a couple of things. Let me throw this slide up so you can get some QR codes. I wrote a manual on how the church can end human trafficking.
Oh, there we go.
There's
Just
a
download
QR
that.
code over there as well, and it's for the church. It's very basic. It's just based on my experience and folks that are experts that I've learned from. And it's basically steps how you can get your church involved, particularly in Fort Worth. There's ways to go to a Five Stones meeting and you can learn. You can go to 3 Five Stones meeting and you will find the people that will guide you into the area of human trafficking where you can contribute to the fight. Some people it's writing a check, some people it's volunteering, some people this becomes their life. They volunteered and now they're running nonprofits that are doing great work. And there's all kinds of areas of human trafficking: demand, victim services, long-term restoration, legal advocacy, legislative advocacy, things like that. So there's all these areas where someone can get engaged. And once you're aware, you can start helping protect the people around you. And I'd start in that small circle of family. I had a discussion with my son just this morning on the phone thing. Doesn't have a problem, but I just reminded him, I know it's coming here. I was like, I just wanted to remind you, somebody's going to show you something one day. I want you to make the decision now, what you're going to do. You have 3 choices: walk away, confront them, come and tell your pop, because he loves you. I'm not going to punish you if you come to me and say, look, I saw this, I need help, or my friend did this, I'm not going to cause. And that's where the relational aspect. And if you treat, if you're a teacher, treat those students the same way. If somebody says something to you, don't shame them, help them, because it's a cry for help.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the tension. We need to take sexual sin way more seriously, but also extend grace and mercy way more lavishly.
Right.
It's like it's a paradox almost. Like we need to elevate the seriousness of little sins, because that's where it starts. But at the same time, we need to be very quick for those who do come forward and say, yes, I'm struggling with pornography, to come alongside them, help them, and show mercy and
I mean, one great way is the Bible, particularly in the book of James, talks about the power of the tongue to do good and to do evil. And oftentimes it's changing the way that you talk about your wife or girl. Like, guys can do this because they can guard their mouth and say, I'm not going to get into conversations where they're degrading a young woman. I can confront them. I just keep my mouth shut, walk away. Both are legitimate options. Stand up for the girl or whatever, but it does begin with those small little steps that begin, a few, words when you're a kid. If you were told, that as a child you're worthless and you're stupid enough, you're
start to believe
it.
Yeah.
And that's going to set a trajectory for your life. But it's the same thing if you talk about someone and degrade them, an individual or, women or whatever, eventually some kid's going to believe that and then act on it.
Yeah.
And that sends them down this sinful path. So it does begin with the mind, what you're believing in your heart, and then what you're saying to people around you. This is the Five Stones meeting. If you ever want to go, I'm always there. There's a few people here that are always there as well. So Great group of people. And,
Let's open it up for Q&A.
Q&A. Anybody have any questions? We didn't cover everything, by the way. That was,
We didn't?
no.
We didn't even
we
scratch the
didn't even
surface.
scratch the surface. We just looked at it. Questions?
Thank you all so much for everything you shared and taught us tonight. If someone suspects that they know someone is being trafficked or is in a dangerous situation, like who do you call locally to report that and get that person help?
So, great question.
Which you know the answer to, but
Which
thank
you know
for
the
question.
answer to that. She's
Better than we do.
Test, yeah. So yeah, like I said, we have some experts in the room. She's one of them. You know, you can call Fort Worth PD. Felicia Talent is the coordinator for the Tarrant County Five Stones Task Force, and she's a civilian that works with the human trafficking unit. So if you know or you suspect someone is being trafficked or exploited, that's a good route to go. There's also agencies in the community. If law enforcement scares them or they're afraid of law enforcement, there's other agencies in the community where you can connect them. And if they're youth, you know, the Underground with Unbound is a great place to get someone some help. If they're adults, there's other agencies that can help, but you don't leave them. I mean, they've shared something that is absolutely difficult, or you're suspecting something. I definitely wouldn't get into hero mode, and you're gonna save them from it, because if someone is being exploited, they've been abused, they're carrying a lot of baggage and trauma that you may not be prepared to counsel them through that. So that's when, you know, you can email or call me. I can connect you with people. They can call you. You know, so there's people that are there to help and are Christians. They're not going to judge them. They're there to serve them because they see them as created in the image of God, and that their life has value and it's worth protecting, and they're crying out for help, because that's the hardest thing I could imagine, is that if you've been harmed, you've been abused, that you're now, you know, sharing that with someone and they need help, and you got to just stick with them even when it's hard and make sure they get the help that they need, and just love on them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank
Do you have any additions?
you.
Any other?
I would say too, I always advise people that, you know, report locally, but also the National Human Trafficking Hotline, because sometimes people are being booed. And if it gets into that database, then sometimes, you know, there's someone's working a case that it may not necessarily go from this, you know, police department to that police department. But if it's in that database, I think that can be helpful for someone that.
Yeah, the hotline, that's a great point. So there's a human trafficking hotline, and you go into the system, and that way that there's a larger entity that can connect the dots, that if someone is being trafficked in multiple cities or there's cases going on, they can connect the dots. But I'd always recommend starting locally so that you can have a relationship with someone that's going to advocate for you and serve you or serve your friend well. And then it'll get bigger and bigger as the depending on the need. And there's a lot of resources out there, ton of resources. People just don't know where to get them. And that's why going to like a Five Stones meeting is good, because you're in the room where all the resources are. Any other questions? It's pretty quiet here.
Well, I had a question. You hear that the Watkins can't cross the border, that disappear. Is that legitimate?
I think it's legitimate. I don't, because it's organized crime and it's criminal behavior. It's hard to track the numbers and what exactly is happening, because it's invisible. You have cases pop up, right? So we know that it's happening. To what extent? I'm not an expert in that area.
Sadly, it's probably more than what's being,
It's always an
which is
iceberg.
terrifying with what you're talking about.
It's always an iceberg. So whatever you're seeing above the water is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the numbers, statistics, everything is usually larger under the surface. We just don't see it. So whatever numbers are thrown around, you can bet that they're higher. And that's the problem, is that these children, no one knows, they're not American children. They're not citizens, so you don't know that they're even here, and they disappear. You don't know they're alive, dead, if they're still in country. And tracking that is a massive undertaking, because you don't know what you're tracking. You're just looking for needles in the haystack.
That's one of the most shocking realizations for me over the last probably 3 or 4 years is the industry of trafficking children is way beyond what I would have imagined. And I remember years ago hearing about the Super Bowl and big sporting events, that's a real hotbed for human trafficking, child trafficking. But on an industrial scale, it's like it's the natural consequence of the West abandoning our Christian worldview and principles. It's like this is what we're producing by abandoning God and these Christian principles that built a society where women and children are protected and stable homes are being created, and
The stability of the home, father in the home, is
all
key
of that
to
goes
life.
together. And we're seeing the consequences of
Fruit of that.
us casually just abandoning what built our very society.
And how do you fight human trafficking is, from my perspective, you have to look at it. I know there's business majors and folks in here. You have to see it also as a business, as an industry. How do you undercut it? How do you stop? You get after the demand. Where's the demand start? Mainly men, the hearts of men. Who
And
what's the only-
pornography.
in pornography, but affecting the hearts of men.
Yep,
That's
yep.
a symptom. Epstein's a symptom of a bigger problem. But what's the only institution on the planet that can actually change, that has the message to change the heart of man and redeem him and rescue him from a life that not only will he destroy his own life, he's going to destroy a bunch of other lives on the way. That's the power of men. Women typically do not do that. Men, unbridled to their sexual sin, complete, no boundaries, like your elite types. Just your average man can destroy dozens of lives, if not more, plus his own.
And they don't feel guilty. They're proud that they're at that level of
Yeah.
power and control. What about a lot of libertarians would say, what's wrong with pornography? We should keep it legal and you're not hurting anybody. What is your response to that? Because that's a very common view among
Right.
even people that would be more on the Republican side. Libertarian would say, hey, that's a personal thing. It's not hurting anybody. We've talked about this a lot, but how's pornography actually fueling this
The
industry?
number one consumer, producer and consumer of pornographic material in the world is the United States. And we buy the most sex, period. Okay, so back to the pornography not being an issue, it doesn't hurt anyone. So pornography, when pornographic material is made, someone is being objectified and they're being exploited to do that. There
Yep,
may be
yep.
a small group of individuals that choose that,
But the industry
usually it's forced
objectifies
conversion.
women on a mass
exactly.
scale.
So every time you click, let's say men, you click on a video or an image, you are increasing the demand. You're
While you're rewiring your brain
All
and
the
numbing your
chemicals,
conscience,
yeah.
which then makes you a
Yeah,
future,
so
consumer.
A friend of mine puts it this way: every time you click on an image, you are creating demand for your wife and daughter and children. Like every time that you click on an image, you are increasing the demand, and that's how the industry works. And then they make more pornography because there's demand for pornography. So that's where it all starts. And back to the church is if we take a sober look at ourselves and get our houses in order and get men healed and restored, and then on the path to stand up for the vulnerable and guard and protect women and children and boys and do our job.
Well, I want to add one more thing on the consequences of pornography and how it's not harmless. I got the 1 minute sign. Is that we've seen this not only in the West but like in Korea and in Japan, that the abuse of pornography and the level of pornography, and then you add AI and the technology that goes with it, it's disincentivizing men to pursue relationships with real females. They could reject you or embarrass you or disagree with you or tell you you can't have that. Or I can get whatever I want in terms of pleasure from an artificial, female, an AI generated.
Or an incel.
Yeah, and so that affects the marriage rates, that affects the birth rates, that affects families, that affects the health of marriages. When you're a guy who has been consuming pornography for 20 years and then objectifying women, and now you're in a marriage, how are you going to treat the sexual relationship in the marriage bed? And then the effects that it's had on females, that now they think I need to watch pornography to learn what I'm supposed to be in order to get the guy that I want and to please the guy that I marry or that I'm dating. And so it actually, pornography is catastrophic to society.
It's an acid on culture.
Yeah, and so that would be actually an easy answer to the libertarian, that actually this is probably at the core of a lot of devastation to society.
Yeah.